Well, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today we're talking about uh, beyond Agile, beyond agility. Really, how do we achieve better impact with our markets and our consumers through applying and utilizing strategic frameworks with our agility. Today, we're being hosted by, if I could make the thing work, the Balanced Scorecard Institute. The Balanced Scorecard Institute is a globally recognized consultancy that provides both the ability to help you create your strategy and execute your strategy. Uh, and we work with organizations, governments, military, private business, nonprofits. Regardless of the type of organization you have, we can help you define and execute your strategy. Today, for our topic. We have three speakers, including myself. We have David Wilsey, who's the CEO of the Balanced Scorecard Institute. We have Nick Pulse, who's the Global Business Agility Advisor and Practice Lead at Accenture, Australia, and New Zealand. And me, your host today, Adam Ash. I'm a senior consultant with the Balanced Scorecard Institute. We're glad you're here today for this topic that a lot of people have been talking about lately more than ever. So let's just kick it off and talk about the first part of what we're here for, the state of Agile. So it just seems to me, and I think a lot of people have noticed this, that there's been a lot of talk in the Agile world lately. Is Agile dead? What's going on? But people are either saying Agile's not working or we're not getting the value we're trying to achieve. What is the problem with Agile? Why aren't we seeing the value that we're trying to get delivered to the customer? What's causing this disconnect between the expectations of what we had when we started applying agility in the organization and the outcomes that we're getting? Uh, Clearly, there's something going on, and I don't know if many people have really considered, but maybe more agile isn't going to be the answer. So let's just think about that for a minute. Nick, what do you think about the state of agility at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thanks everyone for joining today. Um, it's really interesting from a market perspective. I've definitely seen a decline, and I'm sure we all have, in organizations that are going all chips in on agile transformations. And my hypothesis is has a couple of different elements to it. First and foremost, this is not a new concept. Organizations have been dabbling with agile work practices in some way, shape, or form for a number of years now. So most organizations are on the journey in some respect. And I see a lot of organizations winding back a little bit from their pure agile stance. Everything has to be agile within the organization, your finance function, your HR functions, and your delivery teams. And that is just not the reality of large, complex organizations. And controversially, I could care less how an organization actually delivers the work. And I think one of the key tenets we'll be talking about today is connecting strategy to execution, and that's where you really unlock a lot of agility. I also think the agile community has done itself a little bit of a disservice. We preach outcomes over outputs, but yet, and we'll talk about agile transformations, the agile transformations very much focus on the output. Let's implement agile rather than let's enable agility through an organization. So I think the melting pot of all those things combined is seeing, where we're at today in terms of a market and industry and perspectives on the state of agility. And yeah, it's not a good or bad place. It's where we are today. But I do think that linchpin is that strategy to execution alignment. And yeah, looking forward to double clicking onto that as we continue the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And David, you've probably seen a lot of organizations struggling with actually achieving or what their strategic goals. And in that case, what are some of the issues that you see there? Some of the impediments that they're having?
hmm Yeah, thanks. I when we work with organizations, I'm usually helping them on the OKR side. They've got Agile, they're and they're you they they want to articulate what they're trying to accomplish. And when I'm there, I almost always quiz people. How's it going on the Agile? Tell me a little bit about this Agile implementation. And it's funny, I always get the same exact reaction. There's this eye roll, and then there's this deep sigh, and then they say, in theory, this is a great framework, and it's going to produce what we want to produce, but it ends up being a lot of work, and it never really seems to amount to anything. And that's such a challenge. That's why I'm usually there. It's like I'm trying to help them articulate what you're trying to accomplish, create some high level goals, connect dots, align the work with that. So that's what's really missing, I think, with most of the agile implementations that I've worked with anyway.
Yeah,
And
and to your point, David, I think folks have been quite dogmatic about implementing a particular set of work practices across an organization, but not really stepping back and saying, well, hey, is this fit for purpose? Does it optimize flow of value and flow of that strategy to execution? They're implementing agile work practices for the sake of it, not really stepping back and understanding how the system's reacting to that.
And I think that people don't realize that everything we're talking about takes effort. Whether you want to become more agile and more nimble, and Nick, for our sake, let's just admit that you and I use the word more adaptable more than more agile, right? The essence of agility ultimately is to adapt to change, and that's really what an organization needs to be able to do. Now, when you have a strategy that aligns what you're trying to do, adapting to change now, it's more of adapting to changes in the market, adapting to changes in our organization. So it's not just locally things change, that they globally change in the organization. How do we align to them? So we're going to be using that alignment word a lot today, I think. I think that also that there the impediments we see to agility in organizations are also some of these causing some of these issues that we're seeing in the industry and the market, such as uh, one impediment to agile transformation is that we tend to have local pockets of agility in organizations. As you mentioned, HR isn't agile. Legal isn't agile necessarily. Marketing, although a lot of marketing is trying to be more agile, it's not necessarily the same thing. So people have a little bit of difficulty applying agility to non technical or delivery type of organizations sometimes. Uh, that's not to say, by the way, we're not doing Agile well in those places we're doing it. I find that most people are doing it pretty well, and they instead of actually understanding why they're not getting the outcomes they're trying to achieve by aligning with the organizational strategy, if there even is one, which that's another question. Do we even know if there's an organizational strategy? It's that we don't even know if what we're doing is actually going to be useful to help us move those that way. We don't know really ultimately if we're going to achieve our goals, but we know that our process is working well, and which is that part of it. You know, what are you thinking about that kind of issue? What are the impediments we see, and why do we see the same ones over and over again without trying something different other than more agile? Nick, do you have a
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, and I'm sure most of the folks on this session have been involved in an agile transformation in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, I've been personally involved in a lot locally here and globally, and yeah, one of the first things for me that impedes the progress of these kind of change programs is calling it a transformation itself. For me, that indicates you're moving from one static state to another, and is really the antithesis of what we're trying to seed as a cultural norm and a way of working in an organization. Um, I I recognize that organizations and their leaders are starting to get it when they view this as more of a continuous improvement and change journey. There is no end here. We should always be seeking for ways to do things better. It's not a I'm you are now, you've been in, project teams and programs. We're now going to rebadge you as squads and tribes, and we've thrown up a whole bunch of post-it notes in the office or using, Jira as a work management tool, and you are now all agile. Yeah, I see that time and time again as a huge anti-pattern and a limitation to an organization reaching their full potential in terms of that adaptability. So that's kind of, point number one. I think, point number two is not fundamentally changing anything around people and teams. So how we create clarity of purpose so folks understand what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and how that contributes to the organizational objectives and moving them further towards their North Star. How we prioritize work and effectively how work flows through systems, how we incentivize people to work differently, work as a team as opposed to individuals. There's a bunch of different things around the people and teams that need to fundamentally change. And then the third element that I see holding organizations back is having a system in place to measure progress. So not only as they're working through this change journey, but from the outset as well, in terms of how they're organizing their people and teams for optimal flow. I see many organizations doing that based on the bias of the organization structure that they're currently in. How are you using data insights to restructure your teams to improve flow and to use data and insights as signals and indicators across your change journey to give you, quantitative evidence on whether you should be pivoting or persevering on, the experiments that you're running at any given point in time.
You're exactly right. So, I mean, one point that you're making is excellent that, and I'm going to boil it down to the essence of we need to measure what we're doing. And we need to measure what we're doing to see if we're achieving the outcomes we're actually trying to achieve. So that's part of it too. There are lots of great Agile metrics that tell us if we're doing Agile well. They're not as common to see the metrics to say if what we're doing is actually helping us achieve a goal. So that's part of it. I've had tons of conversations recently with organizations I'm working with and the helping them apply or create their new strategies. And we're seeing just what you've said. How do we incentivize people correctly? How do we bonus people correctly? And so lots of things uh, come from the fact that we're doing work. We're probably doing work very well, but we're still not achieving those outcomes we're trying to achieve. Uh, One of the things we see as an impediment to transformations, and it's not uncommon to see that we do great planning. We plan all of the work. We spend maybe a couple of weeks doing our planning for the quarter or whatever we're going to do. And then literally the day that we kick off the work, somebody drops an equal amount of completely unplanned work on the teams and says, and this too, right? What are they? What can they do other than just say yes to their executives that are telling us to do more work? And David, what do you see when you see organizations that are struggling? Maybe they don't have quite a strategy yet, but you kind of see them. What state are they in when you get there?
That's very common. That they like I said, they're usually asking us to help them with OKR development, but what they lack isn't OKRs. It's what usually is what they lack is any kind of strategy component. They might have a high level strategy. We have a high level innovation strategy, and it'll be just a lot of vague, nice words, kind of written at the at the C level, and everybody's supposed to align with that as they're implementing whatever they're doing in their day-to-day work. But what they lack is any kind of objectives or something that connects dots all the way up to that high level goal. So that something that's a little bit more concrete that they can align with that would actually reinforce whatever it is, the high level outcomes you're trying to achieve is usually is what's lacking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes me think. Oh, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and Adam, I think that's a great point. And Adam, you talked earlier about the fact that you and I don't really talk about agile anymore or agility. It's more about adaptability. So when I talk to executives, I kind of boil that down to three things to have a more responsive, more nimble business, and it's really purpose, priority, and flow. So purpose is creating that North Star and that connectedness to the purpose so for people and teams to feel invested in the company, to feel energized and inspired and understand how their piece of the puzzle fits into the overall picture. Priority. So once you've got that, North Star and that light on the hill, making sure that you're working on the right thing at the right time based on your organization's finite capacity and being value led with that. And the third element is flow. So once you've understood what is the right thing to do at the right time, how quickly and safely does that flow through your system from idea to value unlock? If you are focusing on those three things and you are measuring your improvement across those three things, you're going to have a better business and a more nimble and agile and responsive business than when you started. So that's how I frame the conversation when I'm talking to executives these days. And I think we've all been involved in agile transformations where you've renamed people and people and teams to squads and tribes, as I've said. You've thrown up post-it notes and it's like mission accomplished, but you have no idea how the work is contributing to your strategy, how your business performance is going. Yeah, and I've been involved in many, walking the floor where it's almost like a George Bush on the aircraft carrier moment, mission accomplished. I haven't even started the journey. So I think it's being really honest with yourself as an organization that this journey never ends, and we're going to have waypoints along the way that we're going to celebrate, but we need to be really data led and insights led with everything we do.
Yeah, it made me think that the thing I tell most people when we talk about whether agile or strategy is that the what we really mean is extreme communication and extreme collaboration. You can never communicate enough or collaborate enough because both of these are actually similar in the fact that you need to know what's going on around you to be effective. That's really important. One of the things that you mentioned made me think one of the biggest impediments we have is that we say yes to everything and say no to almost nothing, right? So we start all of our projects. We start going down the road toward building things or delivering things or changing things, whatever it is. And then we never say we're done. We've achieved the outcome or the impact that we're trying to achieve ultimately because we're not measuring it or we don't even know that we're trying to achieve that. Or we just, for some reason, people find value in continuing to do work, right? Keep people busy. And I think that keeping people busy is actually one of the issues that we have. We see, again, we're getting outputs, we're getting stuff delivered, but it's not the stuff we need to actually achieve our goals. So that's a big deal. Uh, David, you mentioned OKRs. We talk about this all the time. OKRs are a tool. It's a way to communicate our objectives and the results and the impact we're trying to achieve and how we're going to measure them. That's not a strategy. That's a way to measure things. You can align those things, but actually having a strategy that utilizes OKRs is very different than just having OKRs, which is nice, but again, there's a limit to what they do. And then
Right.
I think as we move to the next kind of topic, which is really how does strategy and agile, how do they work together? I think the one important thing for both agility and for strategy is it's for everybody. It's for everybody. You should be able to understand in your organization how we do the work we do, which might be the methodology that we might be doing agile, but you should also be understanding why we're doing the work, and that's a disconnect for people. Why I might know what I'm doing. I might know what I'm building, but I might and most likely don't know how this fits in with the organizational's plans and goals. That's important for multiple reasons, right? That's important for just the fact that people who actually have something in their work that they understand is helping them achieve their goals, they do better work, right? We tell this story all the time, Nick. We tell this story both on agile people and strategy folks, but we have this image that we show of a person in a clean room vacuuming the floor at a NASA facility. And someone walks up to the man and said, "What do you do here?" And he said, "I get people into space." Right? And that's why it's so important that it doesn't matter from the CEO to the person that cleans the kitchen at night. These are brains, people that have information that if they understand how they contribute to your success, they not only do better work, but they might come up with better understandings of how to do things. What is what are we trying to do? And maybe I have an idea. And I say this all the time. You don't know who that person is. You don't know. Look, there are people that have amazing previous careers, education we've never seen. There's lots of folks that come into in the US, they come from other countries, and maybe they're literally a professor where they came from. They just have to get that credential back here, and they're doing whatever they're doing. You don't know who can contribute some great idea to what you're doing. and they'll never do it unless they understand what you're trying to achieve, and they'll never do that if you don't have a strategy that aligns the organization. So, in essence, there are a lot of similarities between these things and why they work so well together. I'm going to say one more thing, and I'm going to ask you guys questions. But I started saying this, I shared it with you earlier, and I've been saying it a lot lately, that Agile fails without strategy. And ultimately, that's what we're seeing. That when I mean Agile is failing, the ultimate point of hopefully doing Agile in an organization is to deliver value to your customer. So what I mean by that is we're seeing not a great, uh, we don't see great outcomes when about that. We see people doing Agile very well. That's not the issue. And strategy ultimately struggles without having agility because, again, if we have a great aligned strategy and we know what we're trying to achieve, things will change. And things changing means we need a more nimble way of actually addressing them and doing something differently. So, uh, how does how do you think that looks, David? When we talk about bringing a balanced scorecard into the organization, what do you think that looks like? How does that actually impact what we're trying to see?
What it does is it provides discipline. It provides a systematic approach to connecting dots. That's the way I always put it. We're trying to connect the work that people are doing, anything that you're trying to accomplish in a more agile fashion, anything you're trying to accomplish should connect to an objective. That objective should connect to a higher level strategy. You should be able to connect the dots all the way up to the mission and vision of the organization. Um, it gives you a disciplined manner for prioritization. You were talking about having a lot of work dumped on you. Well, yeah, every employee needs a framework for prioritizing so that they know that these are the most important things. We all agreed. We sat around a table and we agreed that these are the most important things. These are the objectives we're trying to achieve. These are the initiatives that got the most votes or whatever framework you're using to prioritize. And so the work that I'm doing related to those things are most important. And so yes, we all are very, very busy. We all have a million things to do at any given point, but that context, that strategic system will and give you the tools you need to say no. Some of our clients tell us the best, the benefit that we got most from this was the ability to say no or not now. I've heard Adam, I
Right.
heard you
No,
say
not
not
now.
now,
Right.
not now. We're going to do this first, and then we'll come back later and focus on the next thing.
Yeah, and Nick, I was thinking that some people might be thinking, well, you're talking about this strategic thing and this framework, and maybe this thing you're doing, and then we're talking about agile and more safe, and there's another framework. Why can these things work together? Does strategy replace agile? Does agile replace strategy? What's going on? Can these things be done at the same time?
For me, they are one of the same thing. Strategy is an important tenet to your agility. If you don't know what your strategy is, you can have the most efficient development shop in the world, but you'll be, pushing out features that aren't needed, or the consumer doesn't have capacity to adopt and absorb. So, for me, strategy is that linchpin to true agility and adaptability. And maybe some, David, you talked about, setting an organizational strategy, but then how do you bake that into the DNA of an organization so it becomes a part of the everyday language and decision making of an organization is really quite important. And maybe a couple of radical examples here. You touched on the NASA one, Adam, but a couple of other ones that I personally love using. The F1 department at Ferrari. Their strategy or their goal is to build the world's fastest race car. Every decision they make, you have to justify how you're going to make the car go faster. So the dev team want a new coffee machine. How's it going to make the new car go faster? Well, if I drink more coffee, maybe good or bad thing. I feel like I'm more productive. I don't have to leave the office to go get a cup of coffee, but you get the drift. Everything that they do internally needs to stitch back to that higher purpose. And a personal example, there was some work, that happened here locally with a accounting software company, mum and dad businesses, small, medium enterprises, and they redesigned their organization, and every team had a one metric that mattered. And one of the examples here is a team was focused on debtor days. So cash flow is very important for mum and dad businesses. Many businesses go bust because of, they've got a successful business, but they can't manage their cash flow effectively. This team's decision making on a day-to-day basis was stitched to how are we reducing debtor days for our mum and dad businesses. When they did sprint planning, when they did daily stand-ups, right? This piece of work I'm doing today, this is what I expect to see in terms of that reduction in debtor days. How do we create that clarity of purpose and alignment to strategy is really true agility in play. It's not the theater of, the process of agile. It's that connection between strategy and execution that is where the real magic happens, and quite frankly, where people, that it's a blind spot for them. They don't even see that, and it's probably why most of these organizations have really struggled in, getting the full value from their agile transformations.
And I'll say that you sparked the. I'm going to say something we've always talked about, that middle management level, that we call it the frozen middle sometimes. These are the poor people, and I respect them. These are the managers that basically have executives saying, you need to get this done. And they have people that are trying to do their best, maybe in an agile fashion. And right in the middle, we're conflating the output of production, do more, with do the right thing. And those cannot be done at the same time. You can do more, or you could do the right thing to achieve our goals. Those aren't necessarily the same. And so when we have a way to align to those outcomes, it helps those folks that are really saying they have the ability now to say up, hey, this is why we're doing this now or not, because this is the goal we're trying to achieve. So stop telling me to do more. We're doing value now. And from that down saying, okay, this is why we're doing this and not that, right? Here's where we're going to say, no, don't do that. Uh, this is really a key to that. It's not, no matter how much we use the word strategy or OKRs, it's unless we have a true strategic alignment with an actual strategy that everybody understands, that is published, that people see, that we're aligned to, all of this is just talk. Because ultimately, the one person that doesn't know what we're trying to do is that one person that's going to do something that actually causes some rework or technical debt or some challenge for us. It's really
It also, yeah, to your point, Adam, I think where you're going, it helps a ton with the autonomy of people and teams with that clarity to strategy and purpose, right? They're at the coalface. They know better than most what their customer needs, wants, and desires are. We just need to get out of their way. What are
that's
we,
right.
what are they laddering up to in terms of a strategy, and let them get along and, do what they do best with that, with that connection to the customer. But see often not in our traditional, organizational structures, managers come in, feel like they know better than the team itself, and kind of leading them all over the place based on, the highest paid person's opinion, which is never a great strategy for our
Right.
prioritization.
Unless it's in your strategy, but that's a whole other thing that we wouldn't want to put that in
True.
there. But that's exactly right. So ultimately, David, tell us a little bit more about what we do, and then how this really helps us unlock some of those issues that Nick has been discussing.
Yes, I mean, I know that the purpose of this webinar was talk about agility and that sort of thing. But for me, what's really lacking is a systematic approach to strategy to development, strategy execution, and alignment. And so the framework that we teach that you see on the screen now is designed to turn that into a step-by-step process. We start with assessing the strategic environment. We then move into strategy, and we design this a plan just like you would with any other strategic planning methodology. We use that to communicate what the organization is trying to accomplish, what our mission, vision, strategy is. We translate that into objectives. The objectives get mapped on something called a strategy map. It's a visual graphic that's got that perspective rows that you can literally see how every objective is related to each other. And it enables you to prioritize and tell a story about how strategy is working. That gets translated into performance measurements, initiatives that get implemented, and then analyze, and so that you literally start making decisions based on the data that you're collecting. And then finally, we move into the alignment phase where we take what we've created at the organization level and you translate that throughout the organization. You essentially cascade strategic objectives into every department so that I know exactly if I'm working in HR, say my HR objectives are going to be aligned with the corporate strategy, and I can connect the dots between our what we're trying to accomplish and what the organization is trying to accomplish. So this is a step-by-step framework we teach in all of our classes that any organization can use to provide the context for that agile implementation.
Yeah, and I think that's what two things you said were really important. One thing is we're not creating your strategy, you are, right? We have a framework that allows you to unlock or uncover what you're really trying to achieve. And often you see really the lights go off in the room when people realize, oh, I see now how this makes sense and how this aligns. And then secondly, when we actually go to implement now, so now if we're doing some kind of agile methodology, then it's now, okay, how do we prioritize these things? How do we align them with what we're trying to do? How do we again say, no, we're not doing this? So yeah, I think that's really important for people to understand that once you have put this strategy into place and you can visualize it, which is what we do, you understand how the work somebody does aligns with what that part of the organization is trying to achieve and contribute to the outcomes, and then ultimately what the organization is trying to achieve, and align to their mission and strategy ultimately. So that it really goes up from all the way to a person to knowing why they're doing what they're doing, how it contributes to what we're trying to achieve. And by the way, again, I'm still going to say it 10 times. The pride people take when they know how what they do contributes to the whole, give people do better work. They're more involved in what they do. They're more interested. They know that even cleaning the floor at night makes a difference in in the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. My one line of code, my contribution to the marketing campaign, whatever it is, now I can really see how I've made a difference in my organization, and maybe we're making a difference in the world. I don't know, but I could connect myself to that, which is really, really important. The other part about this, and I think that we didn't really necessarily make it a thing, is that it doesn't matter what size organization this is. The strategy actually aligns with any size organization and every level of complexity. And I think that also helps with agility because when organizations get more complex, agility tends to get more complex. We tend to start bending it around corners to do things and making things work for us. Uh, Here, we don't have to do that, right? It's a very clear alignment of what are we trying to achieve? How do we do that? What's the best thing to do next? And so we actually now have, I think Agile becomes easier when we have a strategy and a strategic goal and objectives because it's more clear on what we're trying to do at any given moment, and the most important thing, again, it's this saying no. Why are you not doing 10 things now? Why are you doing that thing now? Why aren't you doing my thing now? Um, Really, what we're saying, I think, and this is part of, kind of wrapping all this up, is that how do you be successful with this? How do you become successful? And those are both similar. I'll just kick it off this part of the conversation, but one of the ways we see, and we always talk about, if you need to have leadership that's not only supports what you're trying to do, they're involved with what you're trying to do. So when I was mostly doing agile transformations, the odds of me having a CEO in the room putting stickies on the wall in a planning session was very low. But when I do strategy planning sessions, I most often have C-level CEOs and C-suites and the board of directors in the room with us actually doing the work. That's a difference, right? Right away, if I know that we have those people doing this work to help understand and uncover and define their strategy, there's a different level of commitment, which we don't always see, both in strategy or in agility. What would you? I saw you smile there, David. What are you thinking about that?
Well, the funny thing about what you just said is both in both cases you probably could use some of the other folks. The strategy sessions really need some folks from the ground shop floor, so to speak, in the conversation because they're the ones that are actually doing the work. They know a lot about the details. We have a lot of stories. Our process always intentionally brings in a lot of people, and we have a lot of stories of people who were very, very cold to the process when they started, but then warmed up over time as the light bulb goes off, and they realize, wow, we're actually I'm involved in corporate strategy design. Meanwhile, on the other side, when you get the agile folks doing, actually implementing, doing the work, it sometimes it's better if you have executive sponsors in the room in the conversation so that they're on board with that as well.
Yeah, so it's funny. We have a chart, Nick, that says the same is exactly the same. What do you need to be successful? Executive support, right? You need the resources and the people to be able to do what you're going to do. You have to have someone who's basically going to say, and I've had this before. I've had groups that I'm working with basically every day say to their boss, why is Adam here? Why is he making us do this work again that we've done before, which they weren't, but they thought they were, right? And there's a difference between a leader that says, "Oh, I'll bring Adam into the office and I'll talk to him about it," which immediately kills the whole momentum and right. And then, but or what does happen often is say, stick with it, right? Adam knows what he's talking about, even if you don't understand it now. You'll see this eventually, and that's part of agility too. Nick, how do you feel about that kind of thing?
Yeah, so leadership commitment with any change program is a pretty critical success ingredient. I think what we're talking about here, in terms of a strategy and, cascading that through an organization is easy in theory, but very hard in practice to achieve. And I see many organizations try and do this themselves with best efforts and really struggle with that. And I think it's a balance as well, trying to find something that's aspirational, but not too moonshot that people don't believe in it versus something that's vanilla and quite boring in terms of a strategy. We want to deliver safely and securely, and promote shareholder growth and wealth, and how do we find something that is in that Goldilocks zone that inspires people yet is attainable and creates that connectedness is where the real magic is. And I don't think organizations invest enough in their strategy to make it clear, concise, resonate, and to have it cascade through the organizational DNA.
Yeah, and I think that what you said sparked an understanding that people are bringing agility in for perfectly real good reasons, right? That we want to be more efficient, we want to be more effective, we want to, utilize what we have in a more effective manner. We want to deliver value, right? No one's saying, "Oh, we don't do this," but the missing part and is really this strategy, right? It's really the missing piece, and so bringing those things together not only gives us the capability of doing work more efficiently, more effectively, but it also now tells us the work we're doing is the right work to achieve those goals. And when you bring all of those points together, now you see a real impact in an organization. Now they really have all of the tools they need. And I think that's really what we've been lacking. It's this one additional capability that we are lacking. We're bringing the strategy through from the top through the organization would just unlock those agile capabilities that we've built, but are not being really realized because they haven't been connected to that part of,
Yeah.
really to the organization and to the people. And that's really what we're talking about. Ultimately, it's everyone needs is strategy is important for everyone because I know this, and maybe other people have had this experience, but I've worked in lots of organizations, and when you first start out, you don't even know what the word strategy means half the time, right? What is strategy? And then, even if you finally understand what strategy is, you don't know if you have one or where it's coming from and who's doing it. And right away, that's the disconnect, right? If everyone doesn't know what we're trying to achieve, then how can we really achieve it well? So that's a big deal.
And
So
then maybe the last key ingredient is having, the tooling and technology in place to get those data and insights on how you're progressing towards your strategy, which is
absolutely.
something I see organizations think about as an afterthought. They focus on the people and the process side of the change, but not
Mhm.
the underpinning technology that'll give them the data and insights to make informed, timely, data-driven decisions.
Absolutely. And I think that when you bring all of that together now, you're not just getting delivery data, you're getting organizational impact data. You're getting
Right.
information about what's going across the organization to help realize these things. So yeah, the right tools that help us collect and capture the right information, the right metrics that tell us where, if we're going in the right direction, all of those things together, and now we have a plan. So I think that's, I mean, thank you both for today. I think that's, I think we've uncovered or at least had an interesting conversation that hopefully helps people unlock some of these capabilities in their org or understands what gaps they need to fill, which really it's there. I mean, we have all these great pieces. We just have to put them all together. Do we have any questions? Do we know from anyone?
No, we have a question about it. How do you define agility? Going back to the basics. We've been talking about this for half an hour. What are y'all talking about?
Go ahead, Nick. You define agility for us.
I think if we ask the people, everyone on this call, you'll get a very different response. I'm going to keep it kind of simple. For me, agility is the ability for an organization to respond and adapt to the changing conditions it finds itself in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Adam, what about you? I know.
Well, I think that I just say it simply, change when change happens, right? When we've actually determined that something is different, agility means we do something about it. We don't spend 3 years thinking about it. We have to do something about it. And I think the tough part about that was that before, if we don't have something that we're aligned to, when we change, we're often confused. What are we changing to? What are we, and when we know what we're changing to immediately, because we have an aligned strategy now, then we know we saw a change, we know where we're trying to go, what's the gap there instead of going out there. So yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. What else do we have there, David? Anything else?
All right, Noreen says, in moving from traditional strategic planning to adaptive strategic operational idea processing, development, and execution, how does agility enhance KPI and OKR identification and evaluation? I've
That
reread it a little bit.
that's a lot. That's a big question.
So in other words, how does Agile affect the KPI and OKR development and evaluation?
Sure. I'll just start that off. I think we all could contribute to that, but Agile, I don't think Agile helps or hurts with those things. I think that's the problem because what we're talking about is if we're talking about KPIs, first of all, I'll just use the way I use terms. So I'm going to talk about Adam semantics now. When I talk about KPIs, I'm talking about performance metrics. Is what we're doing working well? Is our system working well? Right? Are we producing the numbers we're producing? So how many did I deliver? Right? That kind of thing. Is the uptime of this system, quality and throughput, great KPIs, but right. So I think part of the agility part versus the strategy part is there are performance metrics that we need to have when we're trying to understand if our process or method or people are working well and at the level of efficiency or proficiencies that we want them to, right? But then there are the value metrics, and I use the term OKRs for saying objectives or and key results for the value metrics. And then those are, did we achieve the ultimate impact? So it's not just what did we deliver, it's what we deliver actually help us achieve the goal. And I think that it's not so much of whether agility is helping us unlock those KPIs or strategy or vice versa. It's really saying, do we understand, number one, what our system looks like when it's working well, and what are the minimum thresholds of satisfactory performance we have, and then how do we actually know that we've achieved the goal that we're trying to achieve? So to Nick, to jump onto your story, because I also occasionally use a Formula One thing. I basically say you're building the car to be the fastest car in the world, or the fastest it can be. But you're not building the car for the sake of building your car. You're building the car to win the race. And that's the difference, right? So the output of that team is building the fastest car that they could build. But the impact that they're trying to achieve is winning a Formula One race. And that's the difference. It's the lagging indicator. And I think that's where we get confused and agile, and then where strategy really helps us. But still, we have to remember that what we've delivered to achieve the goal isn't the goal itself. And that is that lagging indicator that we have to measure. So I can say I've seen organizations have celebrations for delivering the Formula One car, for instance, but they forgot that, and then they go lose the race. That's
Gotta win
don't
a race. Yeah.
right. Don't celebrate mission accomplished after we win the race, not before. So that's kind of that. Any other thoughts there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe just to chime in, from my perspective, one of the great things about agile work practices versus traditional work practices is that consistent cadence that you're reflecting on the work and the performance of the work and the outcomes associated with that work, to make those decisions on whether you pivot or persevere. And I personally think that has a big part to play in the whole strategy OKR, quarterly business review, whatever process you are to determine where is the value, and where do we continue to make bets versus where do we move away because we know the value isn't there. So, Noreen, your question is a really great one. I do think that regular cadence of inspecting and adapting that agility work practices bring into an organization is a really great discipline to help with that identification and evaluation on a continual basis.
Yeah, and now all we're adding is the alignment to our strategic goals, right?
Yeah.
So that's why these things work so well together. And I think that's also why people confuse the fact that they think they have a strategy when they're doing Agile because they do have some level of alignment of what we're doing to deliver it, but they forget that there's more of an organization out there and there's more of a goal, which is fine because we weren't really thinking about it that way. And now that we have all these pieces and put them together, with all those gaps that I think we had in Agile and all those gaps that I think we had in strategy, executing against the strategy, are actually solved by bringing those two things together. I think we have time for maybe one more question, if we have one.
I think that might be it.
Well, then that's great. So let me just say thank you again. If you need more information or interested in more information about anything we've talked about today, reach out to myself or David or Nick. And we'd be love to talk to you, love to chat more about what we're trying to achieve. And hopefully we've given you some food for thought and maybe helped you determine what you're missing in your organization to be successful. So thank you, Nick. Thank you, David. Thank you to the folks in the office there helping us out. Candice, we know you're there somewhere. And thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it.